It's pretty obvious why we have domestic hedge fund administration, but why do we have offshore administration anyway?
The BVI is the cheapest from the standpoint of legal costs. Bermuda is the most expensive. Cayman is somewhere in the middle, and probably quality-wise and value for your money, I would say Cayman. Audit is, there's no cost except for the annual audit. If you have one of the big 3 or 4 do it out of Europe, they're going to be charging you, assuming you have somewhere between $100 and $1 billion in assets as we did, it would be between 10 and 20,000 euros. The lower end is if we gave them the master, the 2 feeders, plus a couple of other vehicles, SPVs that were involved. So there's a group discount, obviously. And what was the other? Administration runs the gamut.
Right.
The only other thing I'd say on costs, and I don't want to get, I'm not giving you a quote, but Cayman will be a fraction of some of those figures that we've just talked about. Having said that, a well-advised US manager should be talking to onshore US counsel probably before it comes to Cayman, because you've got a bunch of, especially now, because you've got a bunch of regulatory and taxation issues that a Cayman lawyer is not going to advise you on. But to get your Cayman fund product, it's a fraction of any of those figures.
No, we're seeing, well, we have our office in Ireland that's seeing a lot of business and UCITS that are popping up. We're happy to handle them and bring them on, although we, as I think we've heard before, they are very expensive. I don't think that it's really, I think it's a little early to go and jump to them, but they're a great product, so we're seeing a lot of UCITS through Ireland. Luxembourg and Malta, additionally, we're seeing a lot of investors and funds coming out of the Middle East liking to go through those jurisdictions. Where in the Middle East we've seen a number of funds that are more oriented, less hedge funds, more of the private equity and real estate. Earlier this year, although real estate has kind of waned, has fallen off. And our offices in Asia are seeing everything. There's a lot of activity, a lot of funds that are creeping up, and they're seeing a lot more of talking managers moving actually onto mainland China. It's slow, but last year there was some laws passed in China that enabled offshore managers to come on mainland and make it a lot less restrictive to own those firms. So I think there's more people and more managers getting there and going there onto mainland China. So we're thinking that we're going to see a lot more funds coming out of that area. Yeah.
You've got this peculiar misalignment in Europe, where you've got the regulation coming from other than the place where the activities are primarily conducted. So the management is primarily in London. The administration is primarily in Dublin, and also in Luxembourg. I suppose that so the center of gravity is in that kind of common law, English-speaking, Anglo-Saxon influenced environment, with the exception of Luxembourg, which is the opposite of all those things. But the regulation is coming from a kind of Franco-German axis, which is, and who knows what do they stand for? I mean, I don't know any German fund managers. I mean, they'd have got to me or close to me by now if they existed. I don't know any German investors in hedge funds. I know some German private equity investors. France is a little different. I have some clients who are on the investor side, but again, manages a tiny amount. So that's different from the situation here, where you've got you've got one political entity with a balance of investors and managers and administrators here, all playing with the kind of same deck of cards with approximately the same interests, other than their different interests related to their role. Jersey is a well-regulated, mature offshore jurisdiction. Service levels are great on the legal side. I mean, all the firms. It's a very competitive market legally. But they don't have the euro in that Ireland and Luxembourg have. I have to say, I mean, I'm not sure if it's bad etiquette of me to say this, but I'll say it anyway, since I'm unlikely to be contradicted. Luxembourg, I mean, there might be regulatory reasons to go there, and actually I think as things shake down, there'll be less reason to go there actually, because places like Cayman will become compliant with all of this stuff that's coming our way. But in terms of service provision, Luxembourg is an awful place in terms of my experience. I've not been a customer there. I'm not a manager. I'm not an investor. But I've worked with Luxembourg attorneys on other aspects of business. Yeah, I think anyone thinking of re-domiciling to Luxembourg, think long and hard. Thing is actually this uncertainty. The sooner this European legislation is cast and finalised, provided it's in some sort of non-wacky form, the better, because Cayman will comply. I mean, there's been a history of Cayman being finished going back to the OECD stuff, Tax Information Exchange 10 years ago. That was supposed to be the end of Cayman. It turned out not to be. They signed the treaties, they're implementing the treaties. It turns out Cayman business is not based on tax evasion after all. It's based on providing transparent vehicles where they're needed. I think the same thing will apply with fund domiciles. Cayman will comply with this. The sad thing is, it's what happens to jurisdictions naturally over time anyway. I mean, they tend to become more sophisticated. Cayman never has lacked sophistication in terms of the laws. They're very adapted and very flexible, and it takes great art to leave laws alone when you fully understand how adaptable and flexible they are. It's not. It's the easiest thing in the world to make more laws and actually narrow opportunities. There's a perception, you see, that Cayman is a place where people go with briefcases full of money. I think you've got to distinguish two types of offshore jurisdiction. The hedge fund jurisdictions are not driven by tax transparency issues. There are other aspects of the offshore, and I'm thinking about centres like Monaco and indeed Switzerland, for example, where the traditional business around trust and money management and private accounts has probably been much more, or you can forget the probably, I mean, it's definitely been much more opaque and much more crossing into that grey area of taxation considerations. That isn't what we're talking about here, but in the realm of hedge fund offshore jurisdictions, I think there's a misconception in France and Germany that if they close the tax loopholes, which they've done, they will strangulate this business. I think on the contrary, what they're going to find is that in 5 years' time, when they've got these treaty powers, they've got the same powers to get tax information from accounts in Cayman as they have in Frankfurt or Milan or Paris or wherever it is. Over time, that's going to work for the offshore jurisdictions, because it's going to be harder for them to be painted into this corner of being shady places, dirty money, maybe some terrorism money there too, God knows what, there's no end to it, how terrible. It's not, it's going to be so transparent, the transparency is going to work for us.